The mahogany table reflected New York's gleaming skyline through floor-to-ceiling glass windows. Marcus Wright signed the divorce papers in a worn gray shirt, calm and silent. Across from him, Vanessa Hale threw her head back and laughed. "Take the truck, Marcus. I'm keeping everything else." Her lawyer smirked behind his folder. She leaned closer, her voice sharp. "A black mechanic raising my son? The judge will love that one. Brooklyn isn't exactly Park Avenue." Marcus kept writing steadily. He didn't look up once. 3 hours later, when his private jet landed at Teterboro, Vanessa's world was about to completely collapse. The Brooklyn garage smelled like motor oil and burnt coffee. Marcus had been under the hood of a 1967 Mustang since noon, working with the patience only handed down from a father. The wrench in his palm had belonged to Thomas Wright, his father, given to him on his 16th birthday. The metal had a worn groove where 4 decades of hands had gripped it. Outside, the late October sun cut sideways through the bay door, painting the floor in long amber stripes. A radio played quiet jazz on the workbench. The kind of station that didn't take requests. Marcus liked it that way. Most of the cars in his shop belonged to neighbors, older folks who paid in cash, younger ones who paid late. Marcus never pushed for payment. The work was the work. The bell over the front door jingled. "Dad?" Noah stood in the doorway, 7 years old, holding a paper bag with both hands, like it contained something fragile. He had his father's quiet eyes and his mother's sharp chin. The combination already made strangers tell him he looked like trouble in 20 years. "I made you a sandwich," Noah said. "Turkey. Mrs. Patel let me use her toaster." Marcus set down the wrench, careful and slow. "Come here, buddy." Noah climbed onto an upturned milk crate and unwrapped the sandwich. He waited until Marcus had taken the first bite before speaking again. "Mom told Grandma something on the phone yesterday." Marcus chewed slowly. "What did she say?" "She said you'll never give me a real life because we live on the wrong side of the bridge." Noah's voice was steady, but his hands twisted the wrapper. "She said Brooklyn isn't where smart kids grow up." Marcus didn't answer right away. He looked out at the brownstones across the street. Bed-Stuy, at sundown, had a particular quality of light, soft, forgiving, the kind that made even cracked sidewalks look honest. His father had loved this block, had told Marcus once that the Wrights had owned this garage since 1973, longer than most of the white-owned shops in Manhattan had been open. "Your mom says a lot of things lately," Marcus finally said. "Some of them she means. Some of them she just borrows." "What's that mean?" "Means she's been listening to people who don't know us." Noah considered this with the seriousness only 7-year-olds can manage. "Adrian?" Marcus turned to look at his son. "What do you know about Adrian?" "He came to dinner once. He laughed at your truck." That stopped Marcus cold. The memory came back unbidden. 6 months ago. A charity gala at the Mandarin Oriental. Vanessa had insisted he come. He'd worn the one good suit he owned, navy, slightly too tight in the shoulders. She'd walked him through the room of bankers and developers like a man walks a dog he's not sure about. "This is my husband," she'd said when Adrian Cole introduced himself. Then, with a small apologetic smile she thought Marcus hadn't seen, she'd added, "He's a mechanic." Adrian had taken Marcus's hand and held it a beat too long, glancing at the calluses and motor oil staining his fingernails. He'd smiled the kind of smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Honest work," Adrian had said. "We need more of that in the city." But his tone had said the opposite. What he'd really meant was that Marcus didn't belong in that room. Marcus had nodded once and reclaimed his hand. Now, in the garage, he looked at his son and finished the sandwich without tasting it. 2 days later, Marcus received the text at 6 in the morning. "Need to talk. My office. 2 in the afternoon. Bring Noah." The Hale and Associates tower sat on the corner of 46th and Madison, 40 stories of glass and ambition. Marcus parked the F-150 in a garage that charged $40 an hour and held Noah's hand all the way up to the 32nd floor. The receptionist looked at his work boots and pressed a button on her phone. Vanessa's corner office had a view of Central Park that made the trees look like broccoli florets. She sat behind a walnut desk in a charcoal suit, her hair pulled back so tight it looked painful. Adrian stood by the window, arms folded, like a man who'd already decided the meeting's outcome. "Thanks for coming," Vanessa said. She didn't stand. "You said it was important." "It is." "Sit." Marcus stayed standing. Noah sat on the leather couch, pulled out a small drawing pad, and started sketching airplanes in pencil. "I'll get to it," Vanessa said. "I'm filing for full custody." The hum of the air conditioning suddenly seemed loud. "On what grounds?" Marcus's voice was level. "Financial instability, inadequate neighborhood, lack of opportunity for a child of Noah's age." She opened a folder. "You live in Bed-Stuy. You drive a truck older than our marriage. You run a garage that barely clears $30,000 a year on paper. The bills are paid, barely." She glanced at Adrian, who took a small step forward. "No offense, Marcus," Adrian said, "but the statistics on single black fathers in his zip code, well, they speak for themselves. Educational outcomes, exposure to violence, the data is what it is. Nobody's saying you don't love him, but love and statistics aren't the same thing." Marcus turned his head slowly toward Adrian. He didn't speak. He just looked. Adrian's smile faltered for half a second, then returned. "Vanessa wants what's best for the boy," Adrian continued. "We can give him Manhattan schools, Aspen in February, summers in the Hamptons, a whole world you can't access." Marcus walked to the couch and held out his hand. "Come on, buddy. We're going to get ice cream." Noah looked up, closed his drawing pad, and took his father's hand without a word. "This isn't a request, Marcus," Vanessa said behind them. "My lawyers file Monday." He didn't turn around. In the elevator, Noah waited until the door closed before speaking. "Dud, are we poor? What does poor mean to you, buddy?" Noah thought about it. "I don't know. Mom keeps using the word." "Your mother believes what she wants to believe," Marcus said quietly. "That's not the same thing as the truth." The elevator chimed. They walked out into the lobby together, past the receptionist, past the security desk, into the cold Manhattan afternoon. They got the ice cream Marcus had promised. Noah picked chocolate. On the way back over the Manhattan Bridge, Marcus's phone buzzed. He glanced down at the dashboard. Unknown number. "She doesn't know about the trust. Adrian has been digging into your father's records for 3 months. He thinks you're hiding family money. Be careful. Initials, MC." Marcus pulled off onto the shoulder near the foot of the bridge and read the message 3 times. The traffic on the FDR roared past. He didn't know the initials, but the warning was specific enough that whoever sent it had access to something private. He looked over at Noah, who was watching seagulls wheel over the river. "Dad, are we going home?" "Yeah, buddy. We're going home." Marcus pulled the truck back onto the bridge and drove straight to the brownstone in Bed-Stuy, the one his grandfather had bought in 1961 for $9,000 cash. He didn't speak the rest of the way. Noah didn't ask him to. The brownstone was quiet by midnight. Noah had fallen asleep on the couch with a book about airplanes still open across his chest. Marcus carried him upstairs, tucked the comforter around his shoulders, and stood in the doorway watching him breathe for a long minute before heading back down. The shed sat in the small backyard between the rose bushes his mother had planted and a wooden bench his grandfather had built. Thomas Wright had constructed the shed himself in 1971, 2 years before Marcus was born. The wood was warped now, the green paint peeling, but the padlock on the door was new. Marcus had replaced it twice in the last decade. He unlocked the door and stepped inside. The smell hit him first. Oil, old paper, a faint trace of his father's pipe tobacco that somehow still lingered after 11 years. The single bulb overhead flickered when he pulled the chain. Workbench on the left, tool wall on the right, and in the back corner, beneath a canvas tarp, a heavy gray filing cabinet bolted to the floor. Marcus pulled the chain key from beneath his shirt. It had hung there since the day his father died, the metal warmed by his chest. The top drawer opened with a soft click. Inside, the records of a life nobody in Vanessa's office building knew existed. Wright Aviation Group, incorporated in the state of New Jersey, March 11th, 1968. Founder, Thomas Edward Wright. Original capital, $8,000 borrowed from a black-owned bank in Newark that had since gone under. First aircraft, a used Cessna 170 crop duster, painted yellow. Marcus pulled file after file. cargo contracts with JetBlue Regional, Delta Cargo Division, FedEx feeder routes through the Northeast Corridor, property deeds for 3 hangars, one at Teterboro, one at White Plains, one in Hartford, payroll records showing 47 employees, average tenure 12 years. The kind of business that didn't make headlines because the man who built it never wanted any. In the second drawer, a thicker folder. The label, written in his father's careful block letters, said, "Emergency Protocol Divorce." Marcus sat down on the wooden stool his father used to sit on. He opened the folder. The first page was a handwritten letter, dated 1986. Marcus would have been 12 when it was written. "Son," his father had written, "if you are reading this, it means someone has come for what we built. It might be a partner. It might be the woman you love. It doesn't matter who. What matters is this. They came because they assumed you were weak. When they underestimate you because of your skin, your hands, or your zip code, let them. The strongest weapon you have is the assumption that you are weak. Keep your head down, keep your records clean, and when the time comes, use what I have left you, all of it, without apology." The next pages were a strategy. Names of attorneys, tax records prepped and filed in triplicate, witness lists, asset schedules updated annually. The most recent in his father's handwriting from 2015, 2 months before the stroke that took him. Marcus turned to the last page. Total asset valuation. The number sat in the middle of the page, typed in plain courier font. $43,200,000, liquid and non-liquid combined. His hand trembled once, just once. Then it stilled. He folded his father's letter back into the folder, the way a man handles something sacred. He pulled out his phone and dialed the number at the top of the attorney list. A woman picked up on the third ring, alert despite the hour. Margaret Shen. "This is Marcus Wright. Thomas Wright's son." A pause, then a long, slow exhale on the other end. "I've been waiting 20 years for this call, Mr. Wright. Tell me what they're doing to you." Margaret Chen arrived at the brownstone at 7 the next morning, accompanied by a man in a gray windbreaker who introduced himself only as Carlos. She was in her 60s, hair cut short and silver, eyes the color of cold tea. She set a leather folio on the kitchen table and accepted the coffee Marcus offered without thanking him. "Your father trusted 3 people in his life," she said. "His wife, his head pilot, Frank Morrison, and me. I drew up the trust documents in 1990. I've updated them every 2 years since. Now tell me everything about your wife." Marcus told her everything. The marriage, the slow drift, the first time Vanessa introduced him as a mechanic, like an apology, the moving out, Adrian. Margaret took notes the entire time. Carlos sat by the window and watched the street. "Adrian Cole," Margaret said when Marcus finished. "Tell me what you know about him." "Corporate broker. Manhattan. Drives a Mercedes. Treats my hands like a disease." Carlos opened a tablet. "We started on him last night. Adrian Cole, 41 years old. 3 prior relationships of interest in the last decade. The first, a venture capital partner in Boston. Lawsuit settled out of court in 2017. The second, a real estate heiress in Chicago. Restraining order filed in 2019. The third, a hedge fund analyst in Greenwich." She walked away when she discovered her family trust had what he called inquiries from his office. "All 3 women," Carlos continued, "shared a profile. Successful, visible, assumed to have access to family wealth. When his research confirmed they were self-made and not connected to inherited money, he disengaged. In 2 of the 3 cases, he left them with damaged accounts." Margaret tapped her pen against the table. "He's looking at Vanessa the same way." "Vanessa doesn't have family money," Marcus said. "No," Margaret agreed. "But you do. And Adrian seems to have figured out something Vanessa never bothered to ask. He's been pulling records on your father's estate for the last 3 months. Quiet pulls. County clerks. Aviation registries. He's looking for the trust we've been hiding in plain sight for 50 years. Marcus set his coffee down. "Vanessa thinks I'm broke." "Vanessa believes what he tells her. And he's told her a very specific story. Margaret pulled a printed page from the folio. He's convinced her that you're hiding assets, not because there's evidence, but because he's leaned on a stereotype that doesn't require evidence. The black blue-collar guy with the suspicious side hustle. The quiet cash flow, the mysterious savings. He didn't have to argue it, he just had to suggest it, and she believed him. She wanted to believe him, Marcus. There's a difference. The custody filing isn't really about Noah. It's about leverage. They thought if they pushed hard enough on custody, you'd have to reveal assets in discovery to defend yourself. Adrian would then know exactly what to go after through Vanessa. Once the marriage was dissolved, Marcus looked out the kitchen window at the shed in the backyard. The morning sun was just touching its roof. My father built that business in a time when black-owned aviation companies couldn't get hangar contracts at half the airports in this country, he said quietly. He kept the whole thing quiet for 40 years, operated through shell companies, used white intermediaries for half the negotiations, never put his face on a press release. He didn't want pride. He wanted survival. Margaret nodded. And now I'm asking you, are you sure you want to take it public in a Manhattan courtroom? Marcus turned toward the hallway. Upstairs, Noah's bedroom door was still closed. He thought about the boy sleeping under the airplane comforter his father had bought him for his 5th birthday. He thought about every time Vanessa had said the word mechanic, like a small apology. He thought about Adrian's certainty in the office tower, the way he had assumed a black man with calloused hands could only be hiding something small. My father protected this so my son would have choices, Marcus said. I'm using one of them. Margaret closed the folio. Good, she said. Now let me tell you how we win. 3 weeks later, Manhattan Family Court, Courtroom 12. The courtroom was smaller than Vanessa had expected. Wood paneling polished too many times. Fluorescent lights humming. A radiator clanking under the window. She sat at the petitioner's table in a cream-colored theory blazer, flanked by 3 attorneys from the most expensive divorce firm on Park Avenue. Adrian sat directly behind her in the gallery, exactly where he'd promised to be, his hand resting on the back of her chair. Across the aisle, Marcus sat in a plain dark suit, no tie, hands folded. Margaret Chen was the only attorney visible at his table. Vanessa caught Adrian's eye and almost smiled. This was going to be quick. The judge entered. Patricia Morrison, 61 years old. Howard Law, 1987. 22 years on the family bench. Known for cutting through theatrical lawyering. This is a hearing on temporary custody modification, Judge Morrison said. Miss Hale, your motion claims Mr. Wright is unable to provide a stable home for the minor child Noah Wright. Proceed. Vanessa's lead attorney rose. For 35 minutes, he laid out his case. Tax returns from the Brooklyn garage showing $29,000 in declared income. Photographs of the Bed-Stuy brownstone. The truck with 240,000 miles on the odometer. Witness testimony from a Vanessa colleague named Brooke Whitmore, who described Marcus at a company holiday party as visibly out of place. Whitmore added that Vanessa had carried him through the room like a charity case. Adrian nodded along in the gallery. Vanessa's hand rested on her lawyer's folder, ready to sign whatever came next. Judge Morrison turned. Mr. Wright, your response? Margaret Chen rose without hurry. Your Honor, she said. The petitioner's case rests entirely on financial instability. We'd like to address that first. 3 rolling document carts had been waiting outside the courtroom door. At Margaret's signal, the doors opened, and a paralegal wheeled them in. The carts were heavy. The wheels squeaked. Vanessa watched, frowning. Margaret lifted the first folder. Wright Aviation Group. Incorporated in the state of New Jersey, March 11th, 1968. Founded by Thomas Edward Wright, the respondent's father, one of 3 black-owned aviation companies in the United States to survive the deregulation crisis of the late 1970s. Current holdings: 12 aircraft valued at $18 million, 3 hangars in New Jersey, New York, and Connecticut, valued at $12 million. Active cargo contracts with JetBlue, Delta, and FedEx generating $7 million in annual revenue. Sole owner, Marcus James Wright, the respondent. The room went quiet. Margaret kept reading. Property deeds, bank statements, aircraft registrations, Every document stamped and certified over decades. Vanessa's face had gone the color of paper. The courtroom doors opened again. 3 more attorneys walked in, single file, each carrying a briefcase stamped with the gold Wright Aviation logo. They took seats behind Marcus without saying a word. The eldest, a man in his 70s with a white beard and a Newark accent, met Margaret's eye and gave a small nod. Vanessa turned her head sharply, looking for Adrian. His chair was empty. She hadn't seen him leave. The gallery doors had closed silently behind him. Vanessa's lead attorney shifted in his chair. "Your Honor, this changes things, but the core argument about Brooklyn schools and the neighborhood counselor," Judge Morrison said, "are you telling me you filed a financial instability motion against a respondent who controls $43 million in family business assets without ever verifying his finances?" Silence. "Counselor, I asked you a question." "Your Honor, we relied on the information available to us through our client." "And did your client conduct any due diligence?" The attorney glanced at Vanessa. "She didn't look up." "Miss Hale," Judge Morrison said directly, "did you ever ask your husband about his father's business?" Vanessa opened her mouth, closed it. "No," she finally said. "Did you investigate his financial situation before filing this motion?" My attorneys." "Did you assume, Miss Hale?" The word landed like a gavel. "I assume." Judge Morrison wrote something on her bench notes. The radiator clanked. "This hearing will reconvene in 30 days for final ruling," she said. "Custody remains with Mr. Wright until that date. Miss Hale, I suggest you and your counsel use the next month very carefully." The gavel came down. Marcus stood, shook Margaret's hand, and walked out without looking back. Vanessa stayed in her chair, staring at the empty seat in the gallery behind her. By the time Vanessa made it to the courthouse steps, Adrian was 3 blocks away and not answering his phone. She tried him in the cab. She tried him from the lobby of her building. She tried him from her office, where the partner on her floor pretended not to notice she had been crying. By midnight, she had called him 17 times, sent 24 texts, and left 4 voicemails ranging from confused to furious to begging. At 6 the next morning, the email arrived. "Vanessa," it read, in his flat corporate font. "I'm not who you thought I was. Neither were you. I assumed you knew about Wright Aviation. I assumed you were hiding family money. That was the only reason I was interested. Now that I see how this ends, I'm out. Best of luck with everything. Initial A." She read it 3 times. And then she went to the bathroom and was sick. At 9:15, her firm's managing partner called her into his office. He was kind, which somehow made it worse. He said the words client concerns and reputational exposure and indefinite leave. He didn't say fired. He didn't have to. The locks on her office door were changed by the time she came back from lunch to collect a coat she'd forgotten. Meanwhile, Marcus had picked Noah up from school an hour early. The 2 of them sat in a booth at Junior's in Brooklyn Heights, sharing a plate of fries and a vanilla milkshake with 2 straws. Noah didn't ask about court. He was old enough to know that whatever had happened, his father had won, because his father was here, and his father was calm. Marcus watched his son dunk a fry into ketchup with the kind of concentration only 7-year-olds bring to lunch. The diner was warm and quiet. The booth vinyl creaked when Noah leaned forward. For a long minute, Marcus let himself believe the worst was behind them. He memorized the moment the way his father had taught him to memorize good things. "Dad?" "Yeah, buddy. Can we go see Mr. Frank this weekend?" Marcus looked up from his coffee. "Why Mr. Frank? You said one day you'd show me where Grandpa kept his airplanes." Marcus nodded slowly. Yeah, we can do that. Saturday." Noah grinned and went back to his fries. That night, after Marcus put Noah to bed, his phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. He almost didn't check. Almost. Unknown sender. No subject line. 3 words. "You won today. This isn't over." Initial A. Marcus stared at the screen for a long minute. Then he forwarded the email to Margaret Chen with a single line of his own. "He is not going to stop." Margaret's reply came within 4 minutes. "Don't engage. Cameras at every door by tomorrow. Carlos will be by at 8 a.m. Carlos arrived at 7:45, dressed the same as before, carrying 2 duffel bags. By noon, the brownstone had 8 cameras covering every approach, motion sensors on the back fence, a reinforced lock on the shed door, and a panic button installed behind the kitchen counter, linked to a private security firm Margaret retained. "You're not paranoid if they really are watching," Carlos said as he packed his tools. "Your father understood that. Your wife is going to figure it out, eventually too." Marcus walked him to the door. "She's not my wife anymore. Then she'll figure it out as the mother of your son." Carlos paused on the porch. "Mr. Wright, your father hired me in 2002, drove me to my naturalization ceremony himself, gave me a Christmas bonus every year I never expected. When people ask what kind of man he was, I tell them this: he was the kind of man who made other men want to be better. You're his son. You understand what that means." Marcus nodded once. "I do." Carlos walked to his car and drove off. Marcus stood on the porch in the early November cold for a long moment, watching the leaves blow down the street. Inside the house, Noah was already at the kitchen table eating cereal, asking when Saturday would arrive. Saturday came clear and cold. Marcus put Noah in the passenger seat of the F-150 at 7 in the morning, handed him a thermos of hot chocolate, and pointed the truck west toward the George Washington Bridge. Noah didn't take his eyes off the skyline as they crossed. "Dad, is the airport far?" 20 minutes from here. Less if traffic stays clean." "What kind of planes does Mr. Frank have?" "All kinds. You'll see." They pulled off the highway into a gravel road, marked only by a small sign that read, "Wright Aviation Group, Private Property," in white letters on a black field. The road curved through a stand of pines and opened onto a tarmac the size of a city block. Noah's mouth opened slowly. 3 jets sat in a neat row, gleaming in the morning sun. A Beechcraft King Air in the center, painted white with a navy blue stripe, and the word "Wright" lettered in clean black across the tail. Beyond it, 2 cargo planes, one with the FedEx feeder logo on the fuselage. A massive hangar stood at the far end, its rolling doors open to reveal more aircraft inside. A man in his 50s stepped out of the office building beside the hangar. Frank Morrison wore a navy windbreaker over coveralls, the kind of clothes a man wears when he doesn't need to impress anyone. He'd been head pilot for Thomas Wright for 20 years, hangar manager for the last 11. "Marcus," Frank said. Then he saw Noah and his expression shifted into something tender. "And you must be the boy I've been hearing about." Noah was still staring at the King Air. "Mr. Frank," Marcus said, "I want my son to see his grandfather's company." Frank nodded. "Come on, kid. Let's start with the bird in the middle." Noah walked toward the King Air like it was a cathedral. He put his hand against the cold metal of the fuselage, then pulled it back, then placed it again. He looked up at the tail, at the name Wright painted there, then turned to his father. "Dad, did Grandpa build all of this?" Marcus crouched down to be at eye level with his son. He built the company in 1968, bought his first plane that year, a used crop duster. Yellow. He flew it himself for 3 years before he could afford a second one. In 1968? "Yeah, buddy." Noah was quiet for a long moment. "A black man built all of this? In 1968? He did. That was hard, wasn't it?" Marcus felt something catch in his throat. "Yeah," he said quietly. "It was very hard. People told him he couldn't. People told him he wouldn't be allowed to. He did it anyway." Noah looked at the plane again, then back at his father. "He built it so nobody could ever tell you what you're allowed to become," Marcus said. "Now it belongs to us. Someday, if you want it, it'll belong to you." Noah didn't answer. He just leaned forward and pressed his forehead against the cold side of the plane. Frank cleared his throat softly. "How about we get inside the cockpit, kid?" 5 minutes later, Noah was strapped into the captain's seat, headset on, hands gripping the yoke. Frank stood behind him, pointing out instruments. Noah's whole face had changed. It was the kind of face a child wears when they realize the world is bigger and more interesting than they'd been told. Marcus stood in the hangar doorway watching them. He remembered standing in the same spot when he was 7 years old, his father behind him, saying the same thing he was about to say to Noah. "The sky doesn't ask what color you are," Thomas Wright had told him. That's why I love it up there. Marcus thought about that a long time. 2 weeks passed. The wind turned colder. Margaret filed counter motions and discovery requests on a tight schedule. Adrian sent no more emails. Vanessa, who had moved into her mother's apartment on East 82nd Street, sent Marcus polite, brief texts about pickup times, and never asked for more. Then, on a Tuesday night, the call came. Mr. Wright, this is Dr. Sarah Chen, NYU Langone, Emergency Department. Your ex-wife was brought in 20 minutes ago. She listed you as her emergency contact, and we have not been able to update her file. Marcus sat down on the edge of his bed. Is she alive? Yes. Stable. She was struck by a vehicle at the corner of Lexington and 82nd. The vehicle didn't stop. She has a concussion, a fractured wrist, and contusions to her ribcage. She is asking for you. I'll be there in 40 minutes. Mrs. Hale, Vanessa's mother, arrived within 15 minutes to sit with Noah. She took Marcus's coat without speaking and walked into the kitchen to make tea she would never drink. Marcus didn't push. NYU Langone smelled like bleach and burnt coffee. Vanessa was in a private room on the 4th floor. She looked smaller than he'd ever seen her. Bandage across her forehead, wrist in a splint, eyes red from crying or medication. Marcus couldn't tell which. You came, she said. You're still my son's mother. She nodded once. She didn't trust herself with more. Marcus sat in the chair by the window. They didn't talk for a long time. The monitor beeped. A nurse came in, checked vitals, left. He'd been there 40 minutes when he stepped out for coffee. Coming back down the hallway, he saw a man standing outside Vanessa's door. Tan overcoat, dark hair, an expensive watch. Adrian. Marcus crossed the hallway in 5 strides. Step away from the door. Adrian turned, unhurried. Marcus, didn't expect to see you here. Step away from the door. Adrian raised his hands in mock surrender, smiling thinly. I just came to check on her. I heard about the accident. Word travels fast in this city. She doesn't want to see you. You sure about that? I'm sure. Marcus stepped between Adrian and the door. And it's interesting. The way you heard about a hit-and-run accident before her own family did. Adrian's smile flickered. Vanessa made some very powerful people unhappy over the past 6 months. Clients who lost deals, investors who watched her name dragged through trade papers. Some people have long memories. You're telling me to be afraid for her. I'm telling you that bad things sometimes happen to people who make bad choices. Adrian's eyes were flat now. I'm in Boston this week, by the way. 2 witnesses, hotel receipts. Sometimes accidents are just accidents, Marcus. He turned and walked toward the elevator. Marcus didn't move until the elevator doors closed behind Adrian. The hallway suddenly felt colder than the November night outside. At the nurse's station, he asked them to add Adrian Cole to the Do Not Admit list. Then he stepped into a stairwell and called Detective Sarah Kim of the NYPD's 78th Precinct. He told her exactly what Adrian had said, word for word. 8 days later, Detective Kim called him back with news. The rental car had been returned with front-end damage to a Hertz location in Yonkers. The fake ID Adrian had used didn't match the credit card he'd placed on file for insurance. The rental kiosk's camera had captured a clear shot of his face. NYPD picked him up at his apartment that morning. He was charged with hit and run, aggravated assault, and 3 counts of identity fraud. Marcus drove to NYU Langone, walked to Vanessa's room, and showed her the text he had just typed. It's over. He's done. She read it once. And then, for the first time in over a year, she cried about something other than her own embarrassment. 12 days later, after she had been released from the hospital, and her firm had formally terminated her, Vanessa knocked on the door of the brownstone in Bed-Stuy at 5:30 in the afternoon. Marcus opened it. He didn't seem surprised. Noah's at a friend's house until 7, he said. Come around back. The yard behind the brownstone was small but tidy. 2 folding chairs sat on the back porch facing the shed. Marcus had set out 2 mugs of coffee. The November light was already fading, soft and gray. The kind of light that didn't hide things. Vanessa sat. Her wrist was still in a brace. She didn't try to dress up what she had come to say. She didn't cry. She just looked across the small yard, at the old wooden shed, and spoke quietly. "I was ashamed of you," she said. "I was ashamed because you were a mechanic. I was ashamed because you were black, and my mother never once approved, and I let her tone become my tone. I was ashamed of myself standing next to you, in rooms full of white people who made more money than they deserved, and instead of being ashamed of them, I was ashamed of you." Marcus didn't speak, and Adrian saw it. Vanessa continued. "He saw it the first night he met you at that gala. He saw exactly where I was vulnerable, and he used it. He fed me a story about you that lined up with the story I was already telling myself. He didn't have to lie hard. He just had to confirm what I'd already chosen to believe." She paused. Marcus took a sip of his coffee. The steam curled up between them in the cold air. "I'm not asking you to forgive me," Vanessa said. "I don't think you should. I'm not even asking you to like me again. I just needed you to hear it from me. Not from a lawyer, not from a judge. From me, because if I never say it out loud, I'll never become someone different." Marcus set down his mug. He looked at her for a long moment before speaking. "I knew," he said quietly. She looked up. "I knew the day at the gala, when you added 'he's a mechanic' to my introduction. I heard the apology in your voice. I saw the way Adrian looked at my hands. I knew. Then why did you stay? Because of Noah. And because my father taught me dignity isn't something you negotiate with. You stay quiet, you keep working, and you let the people who don't see you keep not seeing you. Eventually they show themselves. They always do." Vanessa nodded slowly. Her eyes filled, but she didn't let them spill. "What happens now?" Marcus considered the question carefully. "We co-parent," he said. "You get visitation. We follow the agreement. I won't keep you from your son, and I won't speak badly about you in front of him. But I'm not coming back. We don't get to rebuild what we had. We get to build something different. A working agreement between two people who share a child. That's the offer?" "That's the offer," Vanessa nodded. She didn't argue. She didn't beg. "Okay," she said. "Okay." She stood up, set the half-empty mug on the rail of the porch, and walked back through the house alone. Marcus stayed on the porch and watched the early stars appear above the rooftops of Bed-Stuy. Behind him, the shed stood quietly in the dusk, holding its secrets the way it had for 50 years. New Year's Eve, Marcus and Noah drove out to Teterboro just before sundown. The first snow of the season had started while they crossed the bridge, flakes drifting onto the runway, melting where they hit the warm tarmac. Frank Morrison was waiting for them outside the hangar, his breath fogging in the cold. He had been there since 5 that morning, sweeping the runway by hand and checking the fuel lines twice. Frank handed Marcus a folder. "Southern Regional Airways wants to buy us out. Everything. Aircraft, hangars, the contracts. $78 million. They want an answer by spring." Marcus held the folder without opening it. He turned to Noah. "What do you think, buddy?" Noah looked at the King Air sitting on the tarmac, its wings dusted with white. He looked at the hangar, at the office building, at the bronze plaque beside the door that read Thomas E. Wright, founder, 1968. "Grandpa built it so we'd have choices, right?" Noah said. "That's right. So you choose. Whatever you want. I'll be okay either way." Marcus crouched down. "But what do you think? You're part of this too now." Noah was quiet for a long time. He scuffed the toe of his sneaker against the gravel. "I think we should keep it," he finally said. "Not because of the money. Because Grandpa was a black man who built something nobody believed he could build. If we sell it, someday somebody is going to forget, and we shouldn't let that happen." Marcus put his hand on his son's shoulder and didn't say anything for a long minute. Frank turned away discreetly. When Marcus could speak again, he said, "Then we keep it." "Yeah?" "Yeah." Noah grinned for the first time all day. They walked together to the edge of the runway. The snow was thicker now, dusting the wings of the planes, settling on the tail letters that spelled their family name. Marcus pointed up at the dark sky, where a single airliner blinked westward. "That one's heading for Chicago," he said. "How can you tell?" "Just can." Across the river, in a small Queens studio rented with the last of her savings, Vanessa Hale sat by the window with a cup of tea, watching snow fall on the courtyard below. Her phone chimed. She picked it up. A photograph, Noah, in the captain's seat of the King Air, hands on the yoke, headset slightly too big for his head, His face lit up like a boy who had just discovered the world was wider than anyone had told him. No caption, just the picture. Vanessa looked at it for a long time. And then, for the first time in months, she smiled.